Hey guys, AnihausDrew here. I decided to rent a 2011 Ducati Diavel from rentedducati.com for Valentine's Day weekend. It's well, it's weird to describe it, I don't know. It's a sport bike or a cruiser. Anyways, today we're going to take this thing up Angela's Crest and stop up at Newcomb's Ranch, and I'll give you guys my impression.
So it's not typical for me to usually ride a cruiser style bike, but I'm one of those people who, like I said before, I'm in all the gear all the time kind of guy. But what I also forgot to mention, was that I also love things like traction control and ABS. Now, the Ducati Diavel is one of the few cruiser type motorcycles that actually offer traction control and ABS. But to be fair, to call this thing a cruiser is kind of a misnomer. It's basically a super bike and a cruiser styling. I mean, it's just like a cruiser, but unlike most cruisers, the rear pegs are a little bit further back. I mean, this thing's got loads of power. This bike is 160 horsepower, a Desmodromic 1200cc twin-cylinder engine, and 3 riding modes. Now, it's awesome that this bike has riding modes you can switch in and out of on the fly. But as a Ducati thing, you know, they make it so that you can only change the riding modes once the bike is really stopped. Although technically you can do it on the fly, they won't let you commit to any riding mode until you close the throttle. And you have to hold the mode setting thing for like several seconds. I think like maybe 3 seconds or 5 seconds. If there was ever any bike that was aimed at the American market from Ducati, this bike would be it. The best way for me to describe this bike is, this thing is completely America. I mean, it is a super bike in a cruiser form. It's super comfortable, perfect for touring, perfect for riding 2-up actually. I rented this bike over the weekend because I wanted to go riding 2-up with my wife. And this bike on Valentine's Day was definitely perfect. She said that this is probably the most comfortable seat she's ever sat on any of my motorcycles. And for a cruiser, for the type of power that this bike can produce and the type of engine that it has, it is surprisingly light. This thing says on white paper something about 468 pounds. So the one drawback to this bike, I will say, for people who are used to riding sport bikes, the cruiser form does present a little bit of a drawback in the sense that I'm used to hanging off a little bit off the side of the bike to reduce my lean angle. And this bike does make it a little bit harder, although not impossible. I'm doing it right now. But it's kind of an awkward position, sitting this far back and moving one butt cheek over into the turn. But it depends on the type of rider you are. You know, I'm not a really fast guy to begin with, so for comfort and power, this thing's amazing. I mean, this thing is definitely made to go on freeways. Although today we're going through just a little bit of twisty. Here it is. We're now on Angela's National Forest. One of the things this bike can really benefit from is a quick shifter. You're surprised for such a super bike that it is, it doesn't come with a quick shifter. This bike surprisingly has a lot of good feel. And by good feel, I mean there's a lot of pressure when you try to turn this thing. It really wants to stay straight. Bike is amazing. I mean, this thing is basically, can you imagine just having all that sport bike power just in such a comfortable form? I will say though, this is definitely a bike I might even really consider getting later on. Definitely the weekend rental is a really great way to experience this bike. I invite anybody who ever comes down here to Southern California, if you need a bike for the weekend, you guys should check out Ducati.com. There's nothing that can be explained riding along this highway. It is so serene.
Your destination is on the left.
So I'm back at Mulholland Drive after spending this morning up in Crest, and I'd like to take back everything I said about the Ducati Diavel being slow to handle, being a cruiser. I think I made a mistake. This bike, I don't know, after doing my second session with this thing, I suddenly realized this thing is not a cruiser. It's not a sport bike either. It's something weird. There's some hybrid weird in between. But anyways, one of the things I was complaining about earlier today while going up Angeles Crest was the inability to basically hang off the side of this thing. I'm completely wrong. You can totally hang off the side of this bike. And it is freaking amazing. So the seat for this Diavel, I'll show you guys a little bit later. It looks like initially when you first look at it, for the uninitiated, it looks just like a cruiser seat that's low and whatever. But there's a hump on the back, a little raised portion, that actually makes this bike phenomenal to handle. It's basically like almost like a little back butt rest. And one of the things about it is that when you really hard accelerate out of the turns, your ass just presses up right against it, and it is helpful for getting into, you know, sort of a weird Diavel body position. It is totally possible to hang off the side of this thing. I wouldn't say knee down, but definitely if you need to get one butt cheek off of this thing, you know, and hang off to the side to be able to make a nice, you know, turn without having to, you know, to reduce your lean angle, it is totally possible. You can probably see me doing that right now. So we're up by Running Canyon right now. Hopefully I want to get past these people. Come on. So the interesting thing about this bike is, I mean, Ducati really, when it came out with this thing, it came out with sort of a new, weird bike. A weird, like, in some ways similar to like how their Hypermotard is basically barely a supermoto. This thing is basically barely a cruiser. And I say that because it basically, you can get really freaking aggressive in the turns. So the trick to better control with the Diavel, I noticed, to affect your body position more, is you kind of got to raise your elbows up. And I say that because when you raise your elbows up, you can push a lot harder on the handlebars. To sort of get you into these tight turns, and so you can transition over a lot faster. The Ducati traction control on this thing is actually pretty good. It doesn't interfere that much, in my opinion. Earlier, I hit like a little wet patch, and I did get this thing to slide just a little bit, get the back end to slide out. And the nice thing about it was that it was a nice controlled slide. Meaning the bike didn't high side or anything. It just, you know, I just smoothly got out of the slide. Partially, I'm not entirely sure if the traction control kicked on, or partially because of the giant radial tire in the back of this thing. So this thing really likes to be being pushed around. I will say the Ducati can really handle braking really well. These Brembo brakes are phenomenal. Besides the fact that it has Brembo brakes, the combination of the traction control and ABS makes for really smooth braking when you need to stop this bike. It allows you to go into corners a little bit more aggressively. So unlike Mulholland Highway, Mulholland Drive gets a fair amount of traffic because it's a pretty much residential section of Los Angeles. This is probably the most sport bike-like cruiser ever. The suspension is set up very similar to the sport bike. I mean, it's hard on your ass. You definitely feel every bump in the road, especially these freaking roads. The really cool thing about this bike is actually the suspension is actually very user-friendly on this bike. This thing really likes to be trail braked. You can even do semi-supermoto style with this. I say semi because you can't get your balls on the tank, but you can push the handlebars down and put your ass up in the other direction, just like supermoto. Just a little bit though. Once again, it's that sort of weird Diavel body position. So here it is. What I wanted to show you guys is the seat. The way the seat is shaped, when you get going, your ass just really pushes up against this part, and it's surprisingly, it's really helpful. Also, I wanted to show you guys is that the suspension is user adjustable. Right there. That's actually kind of a nice thing. North Hollywood, everybody. Thanks for watching my video. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to leave down below, and hopefully I'll get back to you guys as soon as I can.